Welcome to the Card Text. This is yet another episode 18. So today we are going to try to play catch up. We missed recording for some of the previous pack previews, so we're going to try and run through all of the pack previews and pick cards from them until we catch up. I guess I'm going first, so I guess we should start with the pack this card comes from. So this would be the Cyclops pack. Cyclops comes with the leadership aspect, and the card I am picking is Field Commander. It says Hero card, Field Commander, 1 cost upgrade with the title trait, with the text, constant text. You take the first turn during the player phase, and the help text, when your turn is done, play proceeds in player order, starting with the first player. You do not take another turn. And the next constant effect is each Cyclops upgrade attached to a minion loses the temporary keyword. So this card's pretty different. It introduces this new way for a hero to play where you're always going first. So it looks like you can always play Maria Hill to get the most benefit out of her, right? The most powerful ally ever created. She's even creeping into X-Men decks. And the ability is mandatory, so you kind of have to do it. You can't skip it. So any disadvantages that may come with that are gonna, they're not gonna be avoidable. And I do like, because Cyclops does seem to revolve around these tactic upgrades. So I do like the ability at the bottom, but I'm just now noticing it says upgrade attached to a minion loses the temporary keyword. And that is probably less strong. Any thoughts on this card?
This would have actually been my choice for Cyclops also. I think it's really... it's just a fascinating card, the way that it is a game changer in terms of the things you can do with cards. It's like a thing that I never would have even considered, but it's a fascinating option and way that it can change up the game, especially with the upgrades and being able to play them on the start of the turn to everyone get benefits from them. It's cool because of how it works with Cyclops in particular, but it's just a fascinating ability.
So what do you think about the last constant ability? Do you think it loses power just because it affects upgrades on minions only?
I think that is a weakness of his tactics, that they can only be out there for one turn. Being able to put them permanently on minions, it helps the -1 attack a lot. You could just drop that on a minion, and -1 attack on a minion is going to neuter it pretty effectively usually. Other ones I don't think are quite as significant, and it's priority target that lets you draw 2 cards when you defeat it. I mean, certainly you have it and you can't defeat the minion, it's nice for it to be out there for more than one turn. But hopefully you're dropping it on a minion and then defeating it immediately and getting the 2 cards. That'll kind of be the typical pattern of that card. Although, you can have a minion out there with -1 attack, doing nothing for several turns, and then make them a priority target, knock them off, drop 2 cards. So, well, as far as, obviously it would be nice if you could put -1 attack or the extra damage on the villain forever, but I can see why they didn't do that.
So do you think there are any drawbacks to always going first? Or do you think it should, most of the time, be more of a benefit than a curse?
I think it's a particular benefit for Cyclops because of those tactics cards. I mean, certainly there's going to be times where that's not the sequencing you want, but that's the kind of thing that happens regardless. Like, what would happen if you're just rotating the turn order, or if you're always going first? I don't think there's a particular disadvantage to always going first. It's just going to oh well, if I wasn't always going first, we never would have run into this problem. It's just, if I wasn't going first this turn, it would have been nice. Maybe you would have gone first that turn anyways, who knows? It's kind of...
And Scott?
I'm going to make it 3 for 3 because I was going to pick this card as well for Cyclops. Yeah, I really like it. It's a really interesting ability. It's, on the face of it, it's very simple, but I think there are sort of hidden subtleties to it, and sometimes you don't necessarily want to be first player, but it's usually not a problem. Yeah, and the way it interacts, as you've been saying, with his other cards, his tactics, and the event that It allows you to get a tactic out of your discard pile. Is that Tactical Brilliance, I think? Yeah, it's going to make playing him, once you get Field Commander down, really interesting. And I think in higher player count games, it could lead to a bit of either alpha gaming from the Cyclops player or a bit of analysis paralysis where they're having to think about who's going to go next and what they need to do to set up things to help the rest of the team. But yeah, overall, I think it's a really good ability, and it's going to be a lot of fun playing him.
Some good points there. Thanks, Scott. And so who's going next? I know we're doing kind of a new format here, so I just want to make sure I get the order right.
Do you want to go next, Theo?
I'm going to skip all the way to the other end and do Storm. So my card choice for Storm is Weather Goddess event. Storm, who's also leadership aspect. Her, I'm picking a card from her hero cards also, which is Weather Goddess. It is a hero action event superpower that swaps your weather support in play with a support of your choice from the weather deck and resolves the special ability on your weather support in play. I think it's just the various weathers that Storm has that are kind of, they're beneficial for the players and the enemies, or harmful, the kind of global effect. You're choosing whether you want to help everybody plus the enemies, or whether you want to hinder everybody plus the enemies. And I just think the Weather Goddess card in particular is going to give a lot of interesting opportunities to, help out your team, then to swap into something that helps your team, then to swap into something that's harmful, and kind of find those moments where you can use that effectively to get the most out of those weathers. And I think that's just going to be some interesting opportunities for kind of how you want to sequence that, what powers exactly you want globally heading into the villain phase, given the things that happen in the player phase, all these kinds of decisions that you can make, especially with the triggering of a special being as a part of that, wherein you might want something particular off of these cards, but you have to figure out how to get the best special ability that works for what you need, plus help everybody else, plus hinder the opponents in the appropriate way. It's just kind of, I think, emblematic of what I find interesting about Storm in terms of those global effects.
Yeah, how many copies do we think she has of Weather Goddess? Probably 3?
I think 3,
Yeah. Yeah, based on the numbering of the cards that we've seen, it looks like she's got 3.
It'll be something you can't quite do every turn, but you'll be able to do it a good amount.
Yeah, although her hero ability is basically the same, so you're going to be able to do it at least once, and then if you get Weather Goddess as well, you can do it again.
I think the ones where you can do it once will be hard choices. The ones where you can do it twice will be the fun, show off your power.
Yeah, and her all of her supports do very interesting things that can be, like you said, both a help and a hindrance. At the same time, you just got to really decide what is going to be the best to move forward with. So some interesting decision points. Yeah, I think my only, I don't want to say concern, but her design reminds me a lot, or a little bit, of Doctor Strange, because she also has, a deck that you set aside that has a bunch of powerful cards, except the weather cards seem to have the drawback, whereas Doctor Strange's spell incantations, not so much.
She'll definitely change the power in the game. She's in there, but I think the global effect helps also to make it much more, much less just kind of like, oh yeah, I can do everything myself. It's kind of like, I can help you guys do more.
About Storm in general, I'm really looking forward to playing her. She's kind of a mix of Doctor Strange and Spectrum, and I really like Spectrum.
All right, should be interesting to see what her playstyle is ultimately going to be like. So move on to our next pick, which should be Scott. What pack is it that you're picking from, Scott?
Well, you two went either end, so I'm going to go in the middle with Mojo Pack, which is the scenario pack for this wave. And I'm going to go with the one card modular that we talked a little bit about in the last episode, Longshot. He is as I said, he's a 1-card modular set that you put into the encounter deck if you want to use him. But he is an ally, and he has a dash for a cost, 2, 2, 3, so 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health stats, and he has a wild resource. And his attack has a star on it, and the star is long shots attacks gain piercing. Also, I should have said he's X-Men treated. And then he's got a constant ability. Long shot does not count against your ally limit. And then when revealed, put long shot into play under your control. This card gains surge. This effect cannot be cancelled. I really like and the reason I wanted to talk about it again was I have been thinking more about the idea behind this card and having things in the encounter deck that you can choose as modulars that are beneficial to the players, so that, as I think we did mention before, it's a bit of a difficulty balancing thing. You can add stuff in to help you out. And yeah, I'm really hopeful that we see more of this. I think often in games like this, once you get one card that does something new and interesting, there will be more coming, often in the same wave or in follow-up waves. And yeah, I really hope we see that. We're like maybe side schemes that are purely beneficial to the players, and they're things you want to get out and want to defeat to get bonuses from, a bit like the ones in the is it the second collector scenario?
I believe so, yeah.
But yeah. So it's more the idea of the card rather than the card specifically that excites me.
Yeah. You picked the card that I was going to pick, so I gotta erase this card from my list. But yeah, the 1-card modular set I think is interesting. I think I'd like to see more, I guess, mini modular sets with up to like a limit of or a maximum of 3 cards. But I mean, he's an ally, so I guess potentially you could also see like supports maybe coming from the encounter deck somehow. So it opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
And so I guess when he does come out, you're getting that surge effect there, and I guess can't cancel it, so that's kind of his cost, right? You get the extra encounter card, you have to resolve that. But pretty good stats, 2/2/3. So the thing that I'm most hyped about for this card, I'm not sure we'll get him, but I'd really love to see, like I said last time, a long shot hero. Really want to see what they do with that power set.
He's a character I don't know, but from doing a little bit of reading and where did I hear about it? I think one of the podcasts I heard about him. And from what I understand, he kind of has the ability to turn up just at the right time and have the right tools for whatever needs doing. So yeah, a hero version of him could be really interesting.
And Theorel, any thoughts on Longshot, the 1-card modular ally?
I think, in terms of them continuing to do these kinds of things, this is one of those ideas that is present in the Lord of the Rings LCG. Really pretty early on, they had allies that would show up in the encounter deck because you're traveling in the woods of Ithilien and there's rangers around and they come out and help you. And I think it's a great opportunity for kind of some thematic stuff to be happening when there's cards in the encounter deck that are helpful. And the surge effect means that you're still getting an encounter card. It's not like just a non-encounter card turn, but having those moments where you can just be like, oh hey, this guy showed up, Longshot showed up just the right time, hopefully, or maybe a terrible time, but you never know. Maybe it's never going to be terrible, but it's just like, oh yeah, if you would have been here a couple turns ago, that would have been much more helpful.
Well, he does have the surge on there, so who knows how bad the surge trains will get on Mojo.
But at least in his case, it's just replacing him.
Mm-hmm, true.
You were going to get an encounter card, just still get an encounter card.
You got an ally instead. Well, an ally also, I guess.
Yeah, not like also not instead. That's what Surge does. Makes it not instead.
And we should mention that he does have. I think you may have forgotten to mention it's got one consequential for each of his basic powers. So one consequential for his thwart, one consequential for his attack, and have we gone all the way around, and are we going back to me now?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I will go with the Phoenix pack. I don't think anybody's picked from the Phoenix pack yet. And Phoenix comes with a justice aspect. So the card I picked, I guess, is a little different. I picked a card from her Nemesis set, the permanent side scheme, Consume the World. And I picked it just because I thought it was kind of bold of them to put permanent on a Nemesis side scheme. So Consume the World is a side scheme from her Nemesis pack or Nemesis set. It's permanent. It reads, while there is no threat here, the scheme loses the Amplify icon. And then has a forced response. After threat is placed here, if there is at least 12 threat here, the players lose the game. And then it has an Amplify icon on it. It has 6 starting threat and 3 boost icons at the bottom. But yeah, I thought it was pretty bold of them to put permanent on this and to have it possibly cause the players to lose the game. And yeah, only time will tell if this was kind of the right decision for this hero, this design, this hero. I feel like it might become pretty annoying the more it comes out, or the more often you see it, I guess. And I think you may see it fairly often, depending on the circumstances with her, with Phoenix. And yeah, when it comes out, I suppose you want to hit it right away because as soon as it does reach 12, you lose. And it's a pretty fair investment to get it down, even from 6 in solo. I guess maybe multiplayer it's easier because there's more characters on the board that could deal with it. And yeah, because it's permanent in some scenario like Red Skull, it's a little worse because it will give Red Skull a permanent +1 to his stats, some of his abilities. But yeah, I mainly picked it because I thought it was interesting that they'd go this direction.
I mean, I think as far as the 6 threat goes, it's not that bad in a 2-player game. That's kind of typical. 3 per player threat is a pretty standard Nemesis side scheme number. So 2 players, or if you have more than 2 players, it's really just kind of normal. But the fact that it comes with a 12 health tough Nemesis minion, it's certainly not a small thing to deal with overall when you get her Shadow the Best. It'll be interesting to see what the rest of her Nemesis set does with it. If whatever the 3 kind of treacheries or treachery-like cards, whatever they are, do, if they interact with that side scheme, it could definitely make it a lot scarier.
I've got a feeling they're all just going to put threat on it. And the other scary thing about it is it's not just Shadow of the Past that can bring it into play.
Mm-hmm.
Because her obligation can.
I think her obligation only brings the Nemesis minion.
Right, but the Nemesis minion brings in the side scheme.
The Nemesis minion brings in the side scheme. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. The chain reaction.
Yeah.
None of them have Surge on it, though, thankfully.
There's at least that. Of course, I always see Shadow of the Past when I just revealed Under Fire, and then I have 2 encounter cards to deal with, and one of them is Shadow of the Past.
Okay, well, so Consume the World, that's Consume the World. Any final thoughts for Consume the World?
No, don't think so.
Very timely title. So we'll go... Now who are we going to? Next card?
That's back to me. So for my last one, I get to do the Wolverine pack, which is great because that would have been my choice anyways. Wolverine comes with the aggression aspect, as one would expect for him, with all of his attacking. The card I chose for him is Wolverine's Claws, which is a permanent upgrade. It has the weapon trait and has a hero action. Exhaust Wolverine's Claws, choose an attack event in your hand, and take damage equal to its printed cost. Play that event ignoring its resource cost. That attack gains piercing. So partially, I just think this is a really interesting thing for Wolverine's Claws to do in the realm of what they have often done with some of these kind of iconic things, such as Captain America's shield or say Mjolnir for Thor, right? They've been pretty restrained with the effects that they have, just a couple kind of small abilities, and then had some of the cards interact with them. So this is kind of the first sort of iconic, what happens with Wolverine? Well, you're gonna get his claws, right? That's just a thing that you expect to see with Wolverine for sure. And so to have something where it's very interesting effect, I think is very cool. The fact that it's also this ability to pay for a cost with damage, and thus enable a kind of berserker style strategy for Wolverine out of just one card. Like, he doesn't even need any other cards that damage him to make him effectively be able to use his health as a resource. That's just, that's nice. And then, hey, why not piercing too? Because he's got sharp claws and they need to have piercing to give it that extra little thematic edge. No pun intended. But yeah, so it's just, all in all, I think it's an interesting effect for an iconic card, and it opens up a lot of sort of strategy that one would hope that a Wolverine type character would have, a thematic perspective, and just kind of it's got great aspect interaction too, which is always a wonderful thing for cards to have. Where, okay, any attack event now, I can see how does that play with Wolverine. This card's too expensive to play, but Wolverine could use damage for it instead, and that's a totally different thing than paying resources. And so it's just kind of, it's always cool to see what interactions that opens up. There's been a lot of talk about how you can run hit and run with Wolverine's claws, which hit and run is just a card that, like, I never would have. I mean, it's so bad in terms of resource to effect. Paying 3 for the two thwart and 2 damage, and it's just like, well, that's not really enough if I'm paying most of my hand for it. But when it's 3 damage, suddenly you can play that card, and getting 2 thwart out of Wolverine's claws is pretty good. And so it's like, wow, this suddenly just takes a card and totally changes it, changes the evaluations of it and stuff. And it's one of those things that I love in these sort of, the LCG TCG model, is just when you have some new card that comes out, and it just makes you reevaluate all these old cards that you just kind of said, wow, you dismissed them. They were never going to play that card. That's always a great experience.
Like you said, this is an iconic card for Wolverine, and it does the thing that you would expect it to do. It helps you play attack events, makes his attacks just appear out of nowhere. Wolverine, that's what he does. And I'd say the only drawback is that, if it is a drawback, is if you use his claws to play some card with some kind of resource kicker, you don't get it. But you could always not use the claws to do that and get the kicker if you really want it. Any final thoughts on Wolverine's claws?
I think it's nice to have a drawback, because I think the ability to exchange health for resources is so strong. A built-in drawback is very good.
Well, he does have 10 health, so do you think that's too low, too high? Usually when, from what I've seen from the heroes, when they have something going on with their health, they have like around 12, right?
Yeah, but he heals 2 a turn, so he has 10 plus 2 per turn.
Yeah, and his recovery is 6. it's just insane.
All right, moving on from the claws to, I guess, is it Scott's turn again?
It is, yes. And I am going to go back to Phoenix. And the card I'm picking is Psychic Manipulation. This is a Justice card. It's a 3-cost event. It's psionic and thwart traded. And it has the play restriction: play only if your identity has the psionic trait, and an interrupt ability which has the thwart label. When the villain schemes, this activation removes threat instead of placing it. And it's slightly a shame that it's trait locked. I would like that kind of ability to be able to use that kind of ability with more characters than just psionic characters.
Sorry, do you want all the heroes to be psychic?
Yeah, but yeah, no, it totally makes thematic sense why it is trait locked. And one of the things I wanted to sort of mention is the with a lot of other trait lock cards, it seems to be a balancing thing, whereas this one seems to be purely thematic. I don't think it's really a question of balance why they've limited it to psionic traded heroes. Which I really like. It's a nice way to use traits as something other than just a balancing tool. I like that it gets stronger against higher scheme value villains, which generally is going to mean the later in the once you get to the next stage of the villain, it's going to be better than it was against the first stage. Any villain that you might threat out with, this is a great card to tech against them. And I just like the general idea of using an enemy's strengths against them. And again, like Longshot, it's something that I hope we're going to see more of. And I think this maybe suggests they will be doing more of that type of thing.
You said you don't think the psionic restriction is for balance reasons, but if they do have like somebody in the future that just turns this card into something amazing, or even some other card, it could be there for balance, right? Something we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that in that case, the hero that could make this amazing will not have the psionic ability for balance reasons, rather than this card has the psionic trait for balance.
Got it. And the costs, like some people like to break down cards into their value. Do you think that you would have to get like 6 removal for this to be in value, or around there, or what do you think?
I think it depends on your deck. Yeah, if you had something like a psionic version of Ms. Marvel where you could bounce this back to your hand and get more usage out of it. And it also works well in high attack scenarios, because that's going to mean you're in alter ego form more, which means the villain's going to be scheming more. So I think just doing a pure cost to potential thwart value evaluation on this particular card is not actually that useful, because there are so many different ways it can be used, and the value is very dependent on the scenario and what heroes you're playing and the deck you're using.
And do you think it combos well? I think it. Well, I mean, it certainly combos with Swift Retribution, the card that makes the villain scheme. It's maybe hit or miss. You get them both at the same time and can pay for them, right?
It's pretty expensive combo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be 6 effective resources, because Swift Retribution is a 1 cost.
I think it's a very interesting card. I think in terms of resources, I think, or just effect for resources, if you feel like the 3 for 6 of Crisis Averted is worthwhile, this hits that if the villain's scheming for 3, which is pretty normal level for a villain to be able to scheme for 3, the boost card. It's just kind of, I don't think that's a out there number to hit if the villain schemes for 4, because you're removing the threat that they would have added, so you get to double whatever their scheme value is in terms of effect. So if they're scheming for 4, you're paying 3 to effectively remove 8 threat. That's a great deal. It's just expensive, because 3 cost events are just a little bit hard to play, because if you typically have a 5-card hand and you're paying 3 for an event, that leaves you with 1 card. So you need to have a little bit of build up, a little bit of something going on to be able to make that work out. You can do something with that last card.
Okay, we'll move on to. Is it back to me now?
That's everything. Hit every pack. That was the idea of the 2 cards. Everybody did 2 cards.
Okay, so we're done with the card picks, correct?
Yes.
So now comes the hard part.
Did we pick a card that doesn't have rules issues?
I don't know. Did we? I mean, I think we know how psychic manipulation works, or it's supposed to work.
We know how that works now. Didn't know how it worked when I think we're good now.
Yeah.
So let's just go backwards. And psychic manipulation. So the question was, with psychic manipulation, who's actually the entity that's doing the thwarting, right? That we didn't know if it counted as the villain for interactions, or if it was the hero, the player playing the hero and playing the card. Or I should clarify, the identity, right? That is thwarting. And we got an answer back. Sorry, I don't have the actual ruling in front of me, but it's supposed to be the identity that is doing the thwarting. So it's not the villain. So it is your identity thwarting when you play this card.
So the question asked was, for psychic manipulation, does the thwart labeled interrupt bypass the crisis icon? Also, does the replacement effect from the villain activating ignore the crisis icon, which would only affect the player? And yeah, the answer we got back was psychic manipulation cannot be played when there's a crisis icon in play. Note that event cards are considered extensions of a player's identity, so mechanically, psychic manipulation is still considered a thwart performed by the player's identity.
Thanks for reading that, Scott.
So that's subject to all restrictions and benefits that come out of your identity thwarting. So if you cannot thwart, you cannot play it. Or if you cannot thwart the main scheme in particular, you cannot play it because that's where the threat would be being removed from.
Does anybody have a card that they picked that has a rules issue that they want to bring up, or clarification that they want to bring up?
Well, so there's Wolverine's Claws, obviously, which
Oh yes, the big one.
huge kerfuffle because again searches your deck and discard pile, puts it into play, which as has been noticed, neglects one particular place where you would find those claws, being in your hand.
Let's go ahead and read and explain the issue.
So I'll read Logan's setup ability is search your deck and discard pile for the Wolverine's Claws upgrade and put it into play. Note that the Wolverine's Claws upgrade in particular has a dash for its cost. So at setup time, which is after you have drawn and mulliganed your starting hand, if Wolverine's Claws is in your deck or discard pile, it can enter play and that's fine. But if it's in your hand, then its setup ability does not put it into play. And since it has a dash cost, you cannot play it apparently because that dash cost means the card cannot be played. This is what the ruling of it was, is that per the rules it cannot happen. The ruling also suggested that the playtesters didn't play it that way, and so maybe you shouldn't either, essentially. And you can just go ahead and put it into play regardless. I think the typical way that someone would play this card is to set it aside ahead of time and just put it into play at setup. But unfortunately, the rules apparently don't support that, and so you have to do with that what you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the entire internet blew up when this came out. And yeah, the answer was not ideal, but I think I heard a content creator that also makes Marvel Champions content mention that maybe one of the reasons that they ruled it that way is because they don't want to say they need to errata it, because they want to make sure that people make those pre-orders and they get the sales, which is understandable from a business standpoint. But yeah, like you said, just kind of ignore the problem there. Just put it into play, leave it there, and you have your clause, you're fine. Any other cards that for rulings stuff, Thero?
Oh, well, is the issue that has been brought up of storms weathers being permanent and thus swapping them into an out of play area would seem to be removing them from play, which is the thing that permanent as cannot happen. So that whole thing. The permanent entry in the rules reference guide states a card with the permanent keyword cannot leave play. It has a bullet point. A player is eliminated from the game while a permanent card they do not own is in their play area. place that permanent card in its owner's discard pile. Few people have hope, optimistic hope that the insert will talk about this, somehow indicate that that permanent doesn't prevent the swapping. I'm not so optimistic. I think it's just something that they expect you to ignore because the card says to swap it. So why would you not? Which I think is, to me, the typical kind of casual gameplay response to a situation like that. Like, I think most people would just kind of shrug and say, "This is what the card says. You just do it, and it's not a big deal." But I know that there are some people that don't feel that way, and I think that's legitimate. I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling like the cards should say to do what they're supposed to do in a clear way that doesn't contradict the rules. That I think that's a fair desire, but I think in terms of actual gameplay, it's kind of similar to the Wolverine's Clause, where I think you just kind of shrug your shoulders and say it's pretty clear what's supposed to happen. We don't need to worry about the fact that it is contradicting the rules technically.
Yeah, and I think Scott, I can't remember if you exactly disagreed on whether or not it is contradicting the rules. I think you said that it should just be clarified. Am I misremembering that?
Well, I initially thought that the golden rule, the second golden rule, kind of covers it.
So the golden rule, RRG, Rules Reference Guide, states, the text of this rules reference directly contradicts the text of the Learn to Play book. The text of the rules reference takes precedence. The text of a card directly contradicts the text of either the rules reference or the Learn to Play book. The text of the card takes precedence.
But yeah, as a couple of people on Discord earlier today pointed out to me, that the golden rule doesn't quite cover it because it's not directly. Yeah, I mean that I don't even really know how to put it into words why it's.
I think it is a little bit problematic from my perspective where Marvel Champions is that it kind of does both. Sometimes it's like, well, that's what the card seems like it would work, and that's pretty much how it has to work. The quote-unquote golden rule, do what the card says. And then sometimes it's like, oh, no, this is what the rules say. That card doesn't work the way you think it would. It works according to the rules. And I kind of wish they would just pick one and really lean into it. And, occasionally something will work in a counterintuitive way. That's just because it's, technical writing game text. But I think there's a fair number of cases where they could make it work in the kind of normal way that people would consider it to work, and they choose not to. They kind of choose a harsh interpretation according to the rules, and it's kind of like, those are the rulings that I tend to disagree with. I wish they wouldn't do that. I wish they would just let the game be a little bit more casual-sided. Or if they really want to be technical, then errata these cards, like this case with the permanent or the case with Wolverine's Claws, and just say, yep, we're going to be real specific. Because if I can trust them to be real specific, I don't mind being specific. I'm okay with that kind of game. I just feel like this game won't pick one. It kind of tries to do both, and that bothers me. And when that happens.
Yeah, I feel like that happens because of some inconsistencies. When the cards are created versus when you go back and read the intent of the rules, I guess. But we should go back real quick, all the way back to Cyclops. We did mention the temporary keyword. Do we have text on how that works? That doesn't come from a leak.
Don't think we do. That doesn't come from a leak. I don't even know if we have it from the leak.
Yeah. Was there anything in the article?
I think there was something in the article, right?
So yeah, in the article, it's talking about Field Commander to ensure that you attach a tactical grade to an enemy before anyone else takes their turn. So using Field Commander to do that before other players get a turn, especially since the temporary keyword makes the upgrades discard themselves at the end of the round.
All right, got it. That's the temporary keyword. That's what it should do, something like that, but we don't have the actual rules text for it.
There's one thing I thought of, Longshot, just a point of clarity, because some people might not be aware. Although Longshot is an ally, which you would consider a player card, when he is defeated, he will go back to the encounter deck discard, not the discard of the player that controls him.
Yes, that should be correct. So I think people were trying to, or wanted to do some crazy like bounce effects with leadership with him.
Yeah, I'm not certain that any of those work.
I think for the most part, he's probably going to go back to the, if not the encounter deck itself, the discard pile, right? Is it equivalent out of play game area, or is it as soon as he leaves play, it just goes to?
If a card that has changed control leaves play after the resolution of the game occurrence that makes it leave play, the card is physically placed in its owner's equivalent out of play area. This is hand, deck, or discard pile, or removed from the game if that player is no longer in the game. Other card abilities cannot interact with this secondary physical placement. It's under ownership and control.
Thank you, Thuro. What does that mean if you use, what's the card? Blue support bounces the card back to your hand, the ally back to your hand. Yes, regroup. So it would go to my hand. What's the equivalent of the hand for the owner, the scenario?
I think it is unclear.
Yeah, that's an open question.
I think the likely scenario is that realistically, if he leaves play, he goes to the encounter discard pile, and you just don't worry about the details.
Okay, that's. I think that's it for the rule stuff. Thanks for joining me, Thero. Thanks for joining me, Scott. Thanks, guys. So hopefully that catches us up with the preview packs that we missed, and hopefully everybody enjoyed that. And yeah, I hope it was informative at the end, and thanks for listening.
And remember, when you would rather not read the rules reference, listen to the card text instead.